right. It's math. Yeah. And thanks for joining us. We're going to talk about some math problems. Now, as a kind of introduction to this, I want you to understand something, and that is that math is really no big deal for the exam. Oh yeah, there's going to be some math problems, but you're only going to see about 8, and they're going to be on the national portions primarily. Now, there are questions on the state exam that have numbers in it. In fact, every question has a number, 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, don't freak out on that. But so there are numbers in some of the other questions, but they're not calculating or kind of find this, find that, or which one of these is correct. Like how much money was committed by the seller to pay for the home warranty, and so you have to find that on a contract, and 100, 200, 300, whatever it might be. Okay. And those types of questions, but the calculation questions will primarily be on the national portion of the test. So if you're coming in from another state, you're only taking Utah law, you can relax a little bit because you're probably not going to see a whole lot of math, if any math at all. Okay, because there's just not that much on the state exam. But on the national exam, there will probably be about 8 questions. And, for those of you that are really good at math, you math savants in the group, you're not going to have any trouble with this stuff at all. If you've had algebra and calculus and trigonometry and whatnot, I don't even like calling it math. Let's just call it arithmetic, because everything you need to do on this test that you're going to be taking can be done with multiplication, subtraction, division, and addition. That's it. However, there are some tricks, and we're going to go through those tonight. But I promise you, if you pay a little bit of attention and practice, you'll be okay. And you know what? If you're just horrible at math, we're not going to correct that. If I can get you to the point where you'll get 6 out of the 8 questions, that'd be fantastic. Because truth be told, if you know the other material well enough, you can miss every dang math question on the test and still pass and get your license. And when you get into business, math is not going to be that big a deal unless you're doing commercial. And then, of course, there's a lot of analysis and whatnot that goes on with that. But for those of you that want to do that or want to learn how to do that or have the aptitude to do that, you're not going to have a lot of trouble. So we got about a dozen questions to do tonight, and they fall into various categories, and we're going to walk through them. But one of the things that is most important about getting through the arithmetic or the math portion of the exam is to kind of understand where you're going and what is important and what is not important. So let's pull up the first question, please, Dan. Tonight, of course, our host with the mostest here is Dan Naylor, who is not only the owner of our school and the president of the Institute of Real Estate Education, but is also our technical person tonight, which is a real treat for us. Okay, here we go. And I'm Rick Roller, and let's just have at it, okay? All right, the first question here. M's home has an appraised value of $380,000. If the assessment rate is 60% and the tax rate is 7 mils, what will the tax be at the end of the year? Okay, so what are we looking for in this? What we're going to do is we're going to pull out some of the information out of each one of these questions. And what is important and what is not important? Well, how about what is it we're trying to solve for? Okay, we want to know what the tax bill is going to be, right, at the end of the year. So so looking at our answers, we've got $1,021, $1,596, $598, and $659. Now, the test doesn't have to be realistic, but the tax bill, on a $380,000 home, it's probably going to be more than $595 or $659. Just thinking it through, okay? So between the two numbers A and B, 1,100 change or 1,500 and change, it's probably going to be one of those two, because you're not going to get it. You're not going to get out of paying really no tax on a almost $400,000 house. Okay, so that's one of the things. Now, what else do we need in this question? Well, that's what we're solving for. How much is the tax bill? And by looking at the answers, it's going to be a numeric value. I mean, what do we got to pay this year for taxes. So what else is important here? Well, obviously 380,000 is going to be important. 60% assessment rate is important, and 7 mills is important. Now, what happens here is that there's a formula you need to use, okay? They didn't see the answers, Dan, or did you pick that up? Okay. I guess we're not to that point yet.
I can send a link to the answers also.
Okay. All right, so let's look at the 380. And now the 380 is what? That's the appraised value. And now in this question, we're dealing with the tax assessor, and this is part of the county government. And who comes out and decides what your house is worth, and therefore they have a starting point to figure out how much tax you're going to pay. Well, that's the county assessor's office, and they come out and they pick up a value. Now, with values that have been increasing so much in the Salt Lake Valley, for the last few years, there's just so many properties in Salt Lake Valley, and the assessors, it's personnel, number of people that they have, they're qualified to do these assessments, is not infinite. They have a limited number of people. So they kind of roll through the valley on a quarterly basis. They have the valley divided into quarters. And so you're only going to get reassessed usually about once every 4 years or so. But on the other hand, if you just bought your house, they pick those up. It's kind of like it got flagged. So they'll reassess that one right away, and so they'll come out and do that. So I don't know when this gentleman bought this house, or these people that bought this house bought it, but they came up with a value of $380,000, and that is the assessed value. Now, the next thing on here is at 60%. And this is kind of a political thing. What happens is there's 2 ways that the government can get more money out of you for taxes on real estate. One of them is to raise the mill levy, right? At this one, it's 7 mills, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. And another one would be to increase the assessment value, the assessed value, right? But what is the 60% all about? Well, like I said, it's kind of a political thing, because what happens here is that the county commissioners are not stupid. They realize that they get put in office by voters. And so what happens is they have a special deal for homeowners. Now, not everyone gets the special deal. Okay, if you have commercial property, the assessment rate is probably going to be 100% of the assessed value. And what at this house, well, let's take Summit County, for example. It was in Summit County. And this house that is worth, well, I don't know if you'd find a house for 380 in Summit County, but whatever. But all right, it's a small studio condo, okay, for 380. If this studio condo in Summit County is being used as a rental, then they're going to hit it full bore. They're going to hit it 100%, because it's not a property in which a voter lives in, okay? On the other hand, if it's one in which the owner lives in it, then they might give you a little bit of a discount. Well, that discount is political. So if they need more money or want more money, they may change this assessment rate to 70%, or they may lower it depending on what the feelings of the voters are at that particular time, and if they want to stay in office or not. So the 60% is an arbitrary number that they have come up with, and they call that the assessment rate. Could be 100% if it was a warehouse or a medical building or something, or it could be 60% if it was a owner-occupied residence, okay? And then you have 7 mills. Now, 7 mills is where we kind of, that's called the tax rate. And now you're looking at the formula there. So the appraised value was 380, that's the first thing. Assessment rate was 60%, right? So that gives us an assessed value, which we'll look at in a minute, but the tax rate was 7 mills. Now, please write this down. A mill is 0.001. A mill is 0.001, 001. Okay, so it's 1/10 of a penny. So 7 mills would be 0.007. You've got to know when you walk in there to take this exam that a mil is 0.001. So what if it was 8 mils? Then the tax rate would be 0.008. Okay. Now, why is that important? Because you're not going to be taxed at 380 grand because we have this political thing going on. So you're going to be taxed at 60% of that, which is $228,000 times the tax rate, which is 0.007, which gives us a tax due. If you do your simple math here, drum roll, $1,596. And glancing at our answers, we already eliminated C and D. $1,596. There's your answer. Grab it, forget about this question, and go on to the next one. That's how you do math. Okay. Don't linger and agonize over these questions, particularly when the answer is staring you in the face and the B here. Okay. Take it, be thankful for it, and go to the next question. Now, what are the tricks here? First, you have to have a feeling for the formula. You have to know that it is the appraised value times assessment rate times assessment value times tax rate gives you the tax due. Now, sometimes they'll work these backwards, okay? They'll work them backwards, which means that they give you the $1,596 and they give you the 220, they give you the assessment rate and the appraised value. So you come up with the assessed value and they want you to figure out what the mill levy was, okay? So they could increase your appraisal, which would give them a higher appraisal value, and then they could mess around with the assessment rate, and another way to increase their taxes, or they could change the mill levy. Now, some of the mill levy from time to time is voted in. I mean, you see when you go to vote that maybe there's 1/2 of a mill or some fraction of a mill that they want to help with the library's cost or whatever. And so, or it's some new thing, like they want to put in a park or they want to do something else. And so they have you can vote yes or no to increase the mill levy. And so sometimes it's voted in and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's voted in by the voters and sometimes it's just the commissioners deciding. So what do you need to know for the test? A mill is what? Say it out loud with me. 0.001. 0.001. Because if you don't know what a mill is, you're going to be in bad shape. So what if it was 10 mils? It'd be 0.010, wouldn't it? So, I mean, you just slide the decimal around, but you guys can do this. You can do this. Even if you're not a math savant, you can do this. You're a math savant, you're already bored to tears. Let's go to 2, please. Okay, now here's another one. Good, it's a backwards and upside down one, and this is very common. So Jay paid $675 in property taxes. If the tax rate is 2 mils, boy, I don't know where that is. I want to live there. And the assessment rate is 75%. What is the appraised value of the home? Okay, well, gosh, this is the same thing, only upside down, right? You can do this. You can do this. Okay. So if you're good with algebra, you know how to flip these formulas around, but let's just throw a formula up here that we're going to use for this one. And, but you could use the other one too, if you wanted to, but we're going to do something. So what are we looking for here? We're looking for the appraised value, aren't we? That's what we want to find out. And we need some figures in order to do this. And the only other figures they give us, of course, are 675. And they give us 75% in 2 mils, okay? So what we've done here is Dan has flipped the formula upside down because the other formula was the appraised value times the assessment rate, okay? And that, because you're going from the top to the bottom, that was times. But you notice here on this formula, it's divide, because he's reversed it, okay? So it was reversed. So if we take the tax due and divide it by the tax rate, now what was the tax rate again? 2 mils, okay? So what was the tax due? Let's go ahead and fill this in, okay? The tax due was $675. They gave us that. The tax rate was 2 mils, which is 0.002, right? Now, if we divide the tax rate Now, once again, multiplication or division, and you can take your own calculator to the exam. Now, you can't take a real fancy one like a one that's programmable and whatnot, because they're afraid that you're really smart and you program some of the answers to the test questions in there. But a simple little calculator that will do what? Multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. That's all you need. Okay. Now there is a calculator on the computer, but you've got to run that one with the cursor. So I would suggest you take a little simple calculator that they'll let you carry in, or if they say, no, you can't use that one, but you can use one of ours, they'll lend you one. That's okay too. It'll be a simple little calculator. And I like, big buttons and big screens on there. So you'll put 675 in and you divide it by 0.002, which will give you the assessed value, which is 337.5. Now, is that the appraised value? No, that's what we're trying to solve for. So what's the next thing? Well, it was in the question. They gave it to you, and that was the assessment rate was 75%. Okay. So how are we going to get this? Well, as you can see from the little formula Dan has put up here for us, we're going to divide. Now, you see the 75%, here's another little trick. You see that percentage sign there? It's got a 0 and a slash, another 0. That tells you that if you put the decimal right on the right-hand side of the 5, you move that decimal over how many spots? 1, 2, because there's 2 zeros. So that's where we got 0.75. I know I'm making this really simplistic. 75% is like 75 cents on a dollar. 100% is a dollar, 1.00. So 75% would be 75% would be 3/4 or 0.75. Don't make this any harder than it is. And what does the formula tell you to do? It tells you to divide the 375 by 337.5 by 0.75, which gives us our answer, which is, drum roll, $450. We look at our answer sheet, which I guess you guys don't have, but the answer is $450. Okay, or $450,000. Okay, boy, $450 would not be a very good commission. Yeah, we like the $450,000. Okay. Now, those are the two properties we're going to work in regards to taxes. And what do you need to know? You need to know that a mill is 0.001 and that the assessment rate is something that's determined by the county commissioners or vote of the county commissioners. And, and the appraised value is what the county assessor came up with. Okay. The mill levy goes up or down depending on how much money they want to be spending for different projects and whatnot to run the county. And that's everything in the county pretty much. But that's how it works, guys. And it's not that hard. You can do this. You can do this. Okay. All right, let's move to the next question, please. Now, this is one where we have some investment properties. I love investment properties. Kay has an investment property they would like to list. Ooh, I love that. They currently earn 10 grand per month in rent, and expenses include $5,000 in maintenance and $300 in tenant improvements. The cap rate is 6%. What would the listing value be of the property? Now, this is a cap rate problem, and the cap rate problems, there's a couple things you need to know, right? Well, first of all, if you want to make the decimal equivalent, well, for what are we solving for here? Let's figure that out first. We're solving for what would we have to list it for? Okay. All right, that's one thing. All right. And so what else is important to us? Well, obviously, if we're evaluating an investment property, something held for investment, cash flow, we need to figure out, well, what is our cash flow? So that $10,000 per month in rent is really important, and expenses are really important. And the two expenses we have are maintenance and tenant improvements, $5,300. Okay. Now, In order to make this work, we need to know what the cap rate formula is. And the cap rate formula can be expressed several different ways. But on this one, we're looking for the value of this property, which is like the listing value, what we would put it on the market for. And so let's look at that formula. And that formula shows the annual net income times, we're figuring this out already, but this is not the formula, but this is how we're going to express it. The first thing we need to figure out on this is you need to know on cap rate problems a couple of different things. Okay. Cap rates are always figured on net income. Cap rates are always figured on, say the word net income. Say net income. When you're talking about cap rates, we're not talking about gross income. We're looking for net income. Well, what's net income? Minus expenses. So our net income here would be $10,000 per month minus expenses that are $5,300. Okay. Now, they didn't tell us whether these expenses were annual or whether these expenses were monthly. But because of the amount of money we're looking at here and the amount of income, they're going to be annual. So you just have to use a little common sense there. Now, notice on our formula, it says annual net income. Cap rates are always annual, annual, annual. Cap rates are always what? Annual. In other words, we're looking at an annual income. And of course, there's 12 months in a year. So they will try to screw you up by giving you a $10,000 per month. Now, there's two ways you can do this. You could take the 5,300 and divide it by 12 to get a monthly expense, but why mess with that? We know that $10,000 a month, and there's 12 months in a year, is going to be $120,000, right? So actually, those you're showing the 5 and the 3 is monthly. Holy crap, that's a lot of monthly expense. Well, I guess they didn't tell us one way or another. You could figure it both ways if you had to in order to find the right answer. There's only going to be one right answer down there out of the 4. So let's do it their way. All right, so that gives us $4,700 of net monthly income. Okay. And then what do we have to do? Since we're looking at annual net income, not monthly, we have to take the $4,700 and multiply it by what? 12. Which gives us our net annual income. Now that's important, right? So it's about $56,400. Now this guy's coming. This gentleman, K, is or lady, whichever, is coming to you, and they're saying, "I want you to list my property for sale. I want to get rid of it." Now, and maybe it is a lady. It could be an estate. It could be a number of things. Maybe they just want to go to cash for one reason or another. Maybe they want to do a 1031 exchange and they just want to know what would we put it on the market for. But anyway, they want to list it. This is great. So we've got $56,400 in annual income. So here's our cap rate formula for coming up with the value. We already figured out that the annual income was $56,400. Now, we did that because we had $5,000 or $5,300 in expenses on a monthly basis, and that's how we had we came up with the monthly income. Then we multiply that by 12, and that's how we got the $56,400. You're with me so far. Now, where'd the 6% cap rate come from? And notice that we've already converted the 6% cap rate from the decimal to the decimal equivalent 0.06, because you could use your percent key, but that's kind of advanced. I don't recommend a student use your percent key on the test. Just work the formula this way. So 0.06, and you see you have to divide, and that gives us a listing price of somewhere around $940,000. Based on a 6% cap rate. Now, I started talking about where did the cap rate come from. The cap rate comes from the the values that are currently in the marketplace for as compared to the income, net annual income that you can get out of these properties. And so we have to do some analysis. Now, I recommend, my new realtor friends are getting into business like you guys, that one of the things you ought to do in your first 4 months or so, I recommend doing it maybe even sooner than that, but you need to meet an appraiser. And you can call a lender and they can introduce you to someone, or you can just call or do some research online and find some appraisers. And take an appraiser to lunch. Because what you want to ask them is, I'm looking for a friend that, I can recommend people to come up with values on their properties and whatnot. And also someone I can talk to from time to time. Because the best way to find out what the current cap rates are in your area is to call an appraiser. Because they're appraising these types of properties all the time. So they'll say, okay, what is a normal cap rate for a 6-plex? What's the normal cap rate for a 10-plex or a 4-plex? Now when you get down to duplexes and whatnot, they also have a cap rate for that, but it's not as accurate. Like, a lot of duplexes are owner occupied on 1/2, and then they only rent out 1/2. But these are properties that are made for rental. And they'll say, well, where's the 4-plex, 5-plex, 6-plex located? And they say, well, it's in downtown Salt Lake, it's in this area, it's in Sugar House, it's in this area. And the cap rates will vary depending on the amount of a rent that they're able to get for that property. That's what will influence that. But they'll say, well, for a property like that, is it newer, is it older, is it good condition? They'll say 6% would probably be a fair cap rate. Boy, that's the best way to get the cap rate for an area from someone who's working with it every single day. And that is invaluable. It's invaluable, but how do you get that? Well, you take an appraiser to lunch and you become their friend. No one takes them to lunch and no one wants to be friendly with them. I recommend that you always have 1 or 2 appraisers that are your buddies that you go to lunch with at least twice a year or so. And then you can call them and get the cap rate. So that's where the cap rate came from. It came from your appraiser buddy. And it came from his last 4 units that he appraised and came up with it. Well, where'd he get it? He called his other appraiser buddies and says, what are we using for cap rates in Sugar House? Well, that's a pretty hot area right now, probably about 8% or 5% or 4% or whatever it might be. Okay. So that's kind of where it comes from. It comes from the marketplace. And the best way to figure that out is by someone that's working it all the time. All right. So that's where we came up with that. And that, if you had the answers in front of you, that would be answer A, $940,000, because that's what we were solving for. We were solving for the money. Now, does anyone who's tuned in tonight, we have about a half dozen or more of you here tonight. What do you have any questions about these first problems, either property tax or cap rates? Because we have one more cap rate problem to do. Chime up now. Okay, then let's jump in and work another cap rate problem, okay? Okay, P is a property that's making, that's how much rent they're getting, $3,300 net in annual income. Oh, that's cool. That's the figure we need. We need annual income and we need it net. So we don't have, that's cool. They want to sell a property. Their agent has found a comparable property making $40,000 annually and sold for $1 million recently. What should the agent recommend P as a listing price for his property? Well, we don't know how comparable it is, but this question told us it was comparable, which means probably an age and condition and area. Comparable properties are just like anything else. Appraisal is comparing properties. Well, what's this one worth? Well, what are properties like that selling for? That means comparable properties. You wouldn't want to compare a brand new one to a 50-year-old one unless the 50-year-old one was in primo deluxe condition, like new. And even so, you might want to find something that's 50 years old. But that's an appraiser's job, not yours. Okay, so we're looking at here, what are we trying to find out? Well, once again, we're looking for listing price, okay? Because an owner may not know what properties are going for. They only know what they're getting in rents. So we're solving for listing price. And we do have a comparable sold for $1 million, but let's hold on to that for a minute. Because what's real important here is the income. This one is 3,300 or 33,000 in net annual income. And but they found a property that was making $40,000 annually and sold for $1 million. Now, what we're looking at here is we don't know, we know they're comparable, but in order to figure out what the 33,000 net is worth, we need to figure out what the cap rate is. Okay, and we already have a comparable that is making 40,000 and sold for $1 million. So what we're looking at here is, you can see we have two cap rate formulas on the screen. And the reason we're going to do that is because we're going to solve for a cap rate. Okay. So let's take one of those formulas and let's plug in what we know this property sold for. What did it sell for? The comparable. What did it sell for? Sold for $1 million. Right? So where do we put that? Let's plug it in. Well, it's going to go in annual income in one or the other, right? Or it's going to go in the value. It sold for $1 million, and the annual income, which was net and annual, is 40,000. So in order to figure out what the cap rate is, we divide the one above the line by the one underneath it, and we come out with a 4% cap rate. Now you see where we came up with that? Well, why do we have to go through that? To get the cap rate so we can solve for the lower income of $33,000 annually, okay? Questions on that? Now this takes a little time, I know, but explaining it to you takes longer than would be to do it once you understand the formulas and plug them in. Remember, every question on the test is worth no more than any of the other questions on the test. So for heaven's sakes, don't spend 15, 20 minutes working on one stupid math program. Remember, I said you could miss every math program or every math program there is. Now, I don't want you to do that. I want you to get at least 60, 70% of them correct. But like I said, we're not going to turn you into a math savant here. That's something you should have done a number of years ago. But you were, oh, I've never been any good at math, and everyone always tells me that. You don't have to be that good at math to be a great real estate agent, okay? But you do have to be somewhat good at math in order to get through the test, unless you're really strong on all the other questions. Because after all, right, you only need an 80%. And on a national, there's 40 questions. Or is it 80 questions? It's 80. What is it, Dan, now? I'm getting my states confused. How many questions on national test?
National is 80 questions.
80, yeah. Okay, so if it's 80 questions and you need an 80%, right? No, we need 70% to pass.
Yeah, just 70%.
Yeah, so you could miss 30%. So what's 30% of 80 questions, guys? 24, right? So you could miss every dang math question and a few others and still pass the test. You're going to do this. You're going to be okay. And when you get into business, how are you going to figure all this stuff out? You're going to make an appraiser friend and take them to lunch, and you're going to pay. Take them to Chick-fil-A or something. You don't have to take them to Market Street or anything like that. They're not used to going there anyway. But just take them to Chick-fil-A or something like that. All right, so what happens here is, let's figure this out. So now we've solved for our cap rate. So in our next formula, we can throw the cap rate right in there. And we already know what the annual net income was, which was $33,000. So we got the 33,000 and we got the 4%. We divide the one up on top by the one below it, and we come up with our value of the subject property of $825,000. Okay, a little less than the other property, but you're using the same cap rate because they were comparable, like it said. Okay. So I've got into a little bit of the practicality of surviving in the business, but for getting through the test, you can see how this works. Now, you must have familiarization with the formulas. You have to have familiarization. And you please understand that they're probably going to give you these things upside down and backwards like they did here. So you have to be able to switch them around depending on how that formula works. And we've got some great illustrations of this in your material for the math class. And you can actually work some examples. Now, once again, I don't want you spending 6 hours trying to make yourself into a math savant. It's probably not going to work anyway. And there's only going to be about 8 questions. So but on the other hand, I want you to get these right. The cool thing about the math problems is that they're, if you know the formulas, you can work them. You know that a mil is 0.001. You know how to convert 4% to a decimal equivalent, 0.04. And you understand that cap rates are annual, 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 annual. Now, if you forget that, you just go like this in the test center. Someone across the room will go annual, because it's kind of a hypnotic technique. That's kind of a joke. All right, let's go to the next one, please. Okay, these are math questions. These math questions are on. Yeah, they're very similar to these. They're not the exact questions, but we're going through the various categories that you may very well see. All right, so let's get into a new math problem, a new element, a new direction. Okay, so we've talked about property tax and we've talked about cap rates. Okay, now we're going to get into some questions that have to do with area. Length times width equals, the area. Okay, so F is building a new home. Oh, cool. And they've laid out the foundation, which is 30 yards by 15 yards. Now, remember the yardsticks you used to get from R.C. Willey, about like this. There were 3 feet. So how many feet are in a yard? 3 feet. Okay, there's 3 feet. There's some things you got to know, guys. I mean, so a yard is 3 feet. Then the foundation is 30 yards by 15 yards. And if they're home, well, no one says, well, what's the dimensions of your property? Oh, it's 30 yards by 15 yards. Well, yeah, I mean, you could call it rods too. Rod is 16.5 feet, but we don't do that. We probably do it in feet. So we got to multiply those by 3. But anyway, we'll do that in a minute. If their home will be 2 stories, ooh, that's important, isn't it? You just doubled your square footage. With a 10-foot vaulted ceiling, how many square feet of living space will they have? Now, we're looking for the square feet of living space. You got that? That's what we're solving for. What is the living space? But they want it in square feet, but they're giving us this in yards. So what do we got to do? We got to convert the yards into feet, but 30 is important and 15 is important, isn't it? And it's also real important that it's 2 stories. Now, what about this 10-foot? They're not asking what is the cubic feet of living space in this property. No one ever talks that way, hardly, because if it has an 8-foot, 9-foot, or 10-foot ceiling here, that would definitely change the cubic feet. But they're asking for square feet, which is 2 dimensions. It's not a 3-dimensional question. Okay. Well, all right. So let's figure this out. Well, so let's look at length. And, we got length and we got width, but both these are yards, so we have to multiply both these by 3, don't we? And we don't need the 10-foot. So 30 by 3 is 90 feet, and 15 by 3 is 45 feet. And so if we take those and we put them in the formula, we come up with 4,050 square feet. But is that the end of the story? No, it's not, because look at the other thing in red up here, which is, how many stories is it? 2. So we've got double the square footage, assuming there's no cantilevers or anything like that. Didn't say there was, so why would we even think there was one? So we're going to multiply that by 2, 8,100 square feet. Man, that's a big house. That's a good one. Hey, if that's a basement, my gosh, it could be another 4,000 plus square feet down there. Big place. Anyway, so that's that. And so what are we looking for? We're looking for the square feet. So what is our answer, folks? Our answer obviously is what? 8,100 square feet. We look at the answers. It's answer A on my answer sheet. And we move on to the next question. Now, it's very important not to spend too much time on these math problems. Now, some people like to take the math problems and mark it for review as you're going through the test. And if you mark it for review, then it will bring back all these 8 or 9 or whatever it is math problems all at one time, so you can enjoy them all at once. Okay. I like to work them as they come, but you decide how you want to do it. If you're working an exam, you just kind of work them as they come, not spend a lot of time. If you're struggling with one, just mark it for review. It'll bring it back. The computer program will bring it back to you at the end of the test. Now, by the way, when you get there, you can sit down with the computer and there's a tutorial. Don't skip that because it teaches you how to use the software that you're taking the test with and how you can bring things back and change things around and go backwards or save it or mark it for review, whatever you want to do. You can mark it correct and then still mark it for review and then come back and kind of make sure you're all right. All right, let's look at another area problem. Well, property lot is rectangular, meaning it's kind of squarish, right? It's 200 feet deep. The total area of the property is 42,000 square feet. How many yards of frontage does the property have? Ooh, tricky, tricky. All right, so what are we trying to solve for? The frontage. But how do they want that figure? Do they want it in feet or they want it in yards? They want it in yards. Oh, of course, but that's okay. We'll be all right. Okay, we just got to convert things to yards. Previously, we had to convert yards to feet. Now we got to go yards to. Anyway, the property lot is 200 feet deep and the total area of the property is 42,000 square feet. How many yards? All right. So this one, we're showing the property here kind of illustrated on a road because frontage is the dimension of the property on the street. You can see that there. See, once again, there's a lot of words that we don't use a lot in normal life. I mean, you just don't. You don't walk up to a young lady and ask her about her frontage. You might get slapped. So, that's not appropriate. So what we're talking about here, frontage, is the amount of dimension of the lot on the street. Okay, that's frontage. Well, how are we going to figure that out? Well, they told us that the total area was 42,000 square feet, right? And looking at our little formula here, we have on the far left. So we have the area that goes on the top, doesn't it? Okay, 4,200 or 42,000 feet. Now, and it gave us the depth, which is 200 feet. So we put that in the formula, and that will give us our width, which is 210 feet. But that's not our answer. And don't stop there because there probably is an answer that's 210. Don't grab that one and say, oh, that was an easy problem. Then go to the next because you just missed the question. Because they wanted the frontage in yards, which, well, let me see, there's 3 feet in a yard. So we've got what? 3 divided into 210, which gives us the 70 yards. Okay. The frontage. And that's our answer. That's our right answer, which on my answer sheet is D. That's a fairly easy problem. Length times width. You probably got this down, folks. They tried to make it harder by, kind of screwing it up and changing feet to yards and whatnot. But, if you're awake when you're taking the test, you're going to be okay. And, we have tons of math samples that you can work if you want. But when you're only talking about, a small percentage of the test, maybe 10%, maybe less. I wouldn't spend, 60% of your study time on a 10% weighted portion of the test. Would you? I hope not. So just do the best you can. If you're a math savant, you're already, like I said earlier, bored to tears. All right, let's talk about some loans. H bought a property for $200,000 with a down payment of $30,000 and has been making payments on the property for 10 years. Now, 10 years later, their property is appreciated in value by 30%. Wow. We had some 30% appreciation in Salt Lake Valley and probably 18 months in some properties. recently. Of course, it's going to fall now that we're normalizing. And their current loan balance is 117 grand. What is their current loan to value ratio? Well, what do we want to solve for here? What is our answer going to be? It's going to be the current loan to value ratio. That's what they're asking us to find, isn't it? Yeah, so let's highlight current loan to value ratio. Now, in order to figure out the loan to value ratio, that's exactly what it says. We need to find out the value, current value, and we need to find out the current loan. So what he paid for it, he paid 200 grand for it, and his down payment of $30,000. I don't know if that's all that important, is it? No, 30,000 is not important. 10 years is not important. 30% is important because it went up 30%. And the balance of their loan is important because that's part of our formula. In fact, the loan amount currently is 117. That's the first item in our formula, isn't it? $117,000. The other thing underneath that is the home value. Okay, well, it was 200 grand, but that was 10 years ago. So what is it worth now? It's worth everything he paid for it, which is 100% plus 30%. Now, does that make sense to you? It said it went up in value 30%. So if everything he paid for it was 200, which they gave us, right? We multiply that by 130%, and that'll give us $260,000. That is our current value. And where do we put that in our formula? Well, pulling up the formula again, we put that in the house value, and also gave us the current loan balance. Now, the old loan balance was $200,000. He's been making these payments for 10 years, and whoopee, he's paid off $13,000. Okay. His payments are probably $2,200 a month. He paid off $13,000. Anyway, whatever. You know, the amortization on loans, they're always loaded in the front end, where most of your payment goes to interest and very little goes to principal reduction, which is a great argument on why you want to lower your loan terms if you can to 15 years. 15 years goes by pretty dang quick. I mean, he's already been in the house 10 years. What do you think his current loan amount would have been if he had a 15-year loan instead of a 30-year loan? Lot less, okay? So if you can stomach it, 15-year loans are a much better thing to do. And you can pay extra money in against the principal. Problem is, most people buy a new car or truck after the first few years and don't follow through. Don't do that. Anyway, so you got the loan amount of 117. You've got your home value of $260,000. To come up with our ratio, we divide the one above by the one below. And of course, that gives us our loan to value ratio of, drum roll, 45%. Pretty cool. Now, lenders would like you to put down 20%. Many people do not, okay? Many people don't put down 20%, they put down less. If you put down less than 20%, they're going to charge you PMI, private mortgage insurance, or MMI if you're getting an FHA. The VA doesn't do that, but those are extra costs for the PMI or MMI, and it adds to your loan payment. So if you had, if this was an old FHA is a little more difficult to work with, but if this is an old conventional loan, and you now could prove that your loan to value ratio is way under the 80%, you should be able to get the PMI knocked off your loan. A lot of it falls off after a number of years anyway, but nothing happens automatically. You have to fight tooth and nail to get it, or you could just refinance, but still it'd be cheaper just to fight it off. When I say fight it off, I mean start corresponding with the lender and let them know that, hey, there's a ton of equity in this home and there's no reason for you to be charging a PMI any longer. And you should have done this a lot earlier than waiting 10 years. There's different things you can do for your homeowners, folks. If you were the one that sold this house 10 years ago to these folks, a few years after they've been in the house, you'd say, home values in your area have gone up substantially. And when you got your loan, because you were there at the closing, you got PMI on your loan. Is the bank still charging you private mortgage insurance? Well, I don't know. Let me look at my payment thing, and they look at their payment coupon. And yeah, it looks like we're still paying PMI. Well, then let me help you by pulling some comparables together and whatnot that you can send to the lender and challenge that and get that taken off. It's not going to come off all on its own. You're going to have to, you're going to have to force the lender. But hey, it's not to their advantage. What PMI does is it's some insurance company that's collecting a premium that if the house went into foreclosure, the lender wouldn't lose any money, even though they did a higher than 80% loan to value ratio, which was to your advantage because you didn't have the down payment at the time to push it away from the property, which would have been a 20% or higher down payment. Well, you certainly do now. You've got great equity now, and you should eliminate the PMI. And then continue to make those payments so a little bit more goes into the principal. At least it's going against the principal instead of paying some insurance company to take care of the lender if you get in trouble. Next question, please. All right, in this one, C's trying to qualify for a loan, and due to their current credit, they can only purchase using a conventional loan with a maximum of 80% loan to value ratio. And if they make a down payment of $45,000, what's the maximum value of the property that they can buy? So what are we looking for? We're solving for the maximum value of the property that they can buy. What can they afford according to this lender? Okay. Well, lucky for them, they got a $45,000 down payment. This is cool. Must have had a hot weekend in Wendover. I don't know, probably not. But anyway, what happens here is they've got their down payment of $45,000. By the way, you're going to have a real estate license, right? Do you know that you can actually endow your children? Recently, my granddaughter bought a property, and I credited my commission as a gift to them under down payment. It's like $9,000. Isn't that cool? Now it's not my broker's money; it was my commission, and I credited it to them at the closing. So they had about 10 grand that they'd saved. So that pushed their payment up to $19,000. You can endow your kids. There's such power with your real estate license, Well, or maybe they don't even have a down payment. Well, you can gift them, they could probably get in on an FHA. But anyway, these guys are going to go with conventional, and they're going to go 80% loan to value ratio. They have $45,000 to put down. So let's look at a formula here. What are we going to solve for on this one? We're going to solve for the value of the property. So what's important to us? Well, 80% loan to value is important. And also 45,000 is important. Okay. All right. Now, why are these things important? Well, because it's going to give us the answer to our question, which how much house can they buy? All right, so looking at our formula here, particularly the one on the right, we see that there is a ratio, and the ratio is 80%, right? That's after 20% down payment. 100% of it's 100. They're going to put down 20%, and that gives us 80%. It's going to be the amount of the loan. So let's throw some more numbers up here on the board into our formula. Okay, what is the down payment? $45,000. And what does that number represent of the total price? Well, it represents 20%. They gave you that. Now, what is a decimal equivalent of 20%? Well, moving it over one, starting on the right, moving it over 1, 2 places, it's 0.2, right? Or you could call it 0.20 if you wanted to, so it still looks like 20, but don't need it. So what are we going to do? We're going to divide the 45,000, which is the number that represents. But what is that number in dollars? So the amount of home value they can afford would be, with the 20% down payment of $45,000, $225,000. Probably a townhouse or condo somewhere. Okay? $225,000, $45,000 down payment. Now, in addition to their down payment, they're going to have some closing costs as well. Okay. But continuing with the theme that I mentioned to you a little earlier, you know, 200 and change property, let's say just for easy math, $220,000. 3% commission would be about $6,600, and your broker's going to want some of that. Let's say you gave them the 600, so you could still gift your kids a couple of grand, which would help with their closing cost. Okay,
We're about at time. Should we give some final comments and wrap up?
okay. Final comments on the math. Now we do have other math videos. You know, where we get into a couple of more different types of problems, but these are the main ones you're going to see. And we have plenty of practice problems. And as you know, you can always call. My number is 801-556-8000. That's 556-8000. Area code 801. Operators are standing by. And I have another math program that gets into more detail on some of this that I'd be happy to gift you. There's no charge for it. And it's fun. It's kind of a fun thing. So you're welcome to have that if you desire. For those of you that are math savants, heck, you don't need it. And for those of you who are struggling with math, probably ought to get it and see it and work some of the math problems. Even though you can pass without it, I want you to get at least 80% of those math problems right. Okay. There's a couple of tricks and we've gone through them tonight, you know, so watch for those. And as always, go out there and make it happen. And remember, when you get into business, words to live by: bless lives, make money. It's okay to make the money if you bless the lives. And you're going to bless the lives by helping people get into properties and making sure their transactions work perfectly. Or maybe get through a couple of bumps and still get to the closing. We love you guys. Thanks for being at our school, and we will talk to you later. Thanks, Dan. Have a great night.